One of the most commonly asked questions I get about this car, even though I've mentioned it a few times so far, is who tuned it? Well, what's the deal with tuning?
Well, in today's episode, we're going to talk about just that, tuning. We're going to jump into some technical details specific to my car and the tuning process that went with it, and get it ready for some real power. Let's get to it.
Up to this point in the series, you guys have seen me take out, put back in, take out, put back in my engine too many times. I've gone through the break-in process, I've blown my motor twice, and gone through kind of the whole mechanical process of it, and brought you along for as much as I could. Who else is tired of seeing the same content over and over? I know I am.
Now that I have the car running and driving as it should, it's time for me to finally get the tuning figured out. In the last video, I mentioned that I might be changing tuning companies, and that is what I'm doing in this episode. Previously, I was tuned on United Motorsport software, and before anybody gets the wrong idea, I think UM is a great company, and they've done a ton for the VW and Audi community. The only problem is my local United Motorsport licensed dealer is so backlogged that it would probably take months for me to get 1 or 2 revisions done at this point. And by the time I'd rent a trailer the car an hour away to the shop, drop it off, go back and get it later, I'd probably be a couple $100 deep, and it'd be like mid-January. And if I want to change my fuel system at all, which I am going to do, then I'd have to do that whole process again. And I just don't have the time or patience for that.
Luckily, in the middle of this last rebuild, I learned of a great option. There aren't a lot of big turbo B8A4s out there, probably don't have to tell you that. But of the ones that are out there, there's one company that's been making waves in the tuning world, and that's Ward Performance Tuning. Of all the people I've talked to in the last year about tuning this car, every single one of them strongly recommends Ward Performance Tuning, so I'm giving it a shot. But to tell you more about the company, here's Tyler Ward.
Hey guys, my name's Tyler Ward. I run Ward Performance Tuning. I tuned Chris Flink's car, and I offer tuning services for B8s for custom tuning, as well as flex fuel. Vehicles right now are currently in development for B8, and I offer Mark 7 Golf R tuning, as well as MQB S3 and 3.0T A6 and S4s. About in 2017, 2018, start out 2015, I started getting into Audis and Volkswagens, fixing and repairing and diagnosing them. And then once I started modifying them and making them fast, I realized that there wasn't very many capable tuners locally or even remotely for us to get the projects finished. So we had a few projects that we were working on and didn't really have anybody to tune them. So I decided to learn, and 2017, 2018 was when I really dove into it. I started out with the old school stuff, so 1.8Ts and 2.7 twin turbos, all Mototronics ME7 stuff, which I still offer tuning services for, but trying to phase it out and more move towards the newer stuff.
Aside from the pure genius of Tyler Ward himself, the best part about this tuning process is that I get to do all the data logging and the loading of files myself with the help of HP Tuners. This is an HP Tuners dongle, specifically an MPVI2, which essentially allows anybody with HP Tuners software to custom tune their own car, or in my case, remote tune. With this dongle, I can easily plug it into my OBD2 port, run a log on a 3rd gear pole, send that log over to Tyler, he makes edits, sends it back to me extremely quickly, I load the new file onto the car, and within minutes, I have a new tune and the car runs even better. And so far, it's been going really well. There's no burning oil or excessive flow by this time, knock on wood. We're on the 4th or 5th revision of the file, I think, and right now it's on a medium boost file because I'm still doing break-in miles, so I'm going to stick with that until we get more miles on the engine, and then we can start to turn things up and have some fun. But let's talk about break-in for a little bit. You could probably talk to like 100 machinists, 100 mechanics or 100 tuners and you'd get 300 different recommendations on how to break in an engine. So just don't take what I'm taking as fact or even as a recommendation. I'm not a mechanic, and drive at your own risk, I guess. Right now I'm at about 300 miles on the car. I'm gonna do an oil change, and then at about 1,000 miles I'll do another oil change, and then at about 3,000 miles I'll do another oil change, and then after that I'll do regular service intervals, assuming I get to that point with the car this time. But that's just kind of what I've learned and what I've been taught for breaking in the engine, but there is like 1,000 other ways to do it. So, changing the oil, JE told me just use non-synthetic. That's the most detail they could give me, which is kind of encouraging, so they're not too worried. They just say use conventional oil, don't use synthetic. And since these cars use 5W40 synthetic, I went with 10W40 non-synthetic, and I'm gonna use that for the next couple thousand miles, and then I'll go back to the full synthetic. And as far as break-in driving, I'm just doing city driving for the next couple thousand miles as much as I can, just different throttle inputs as much as possible. The machine shop told me don't go on the highway for long periods of time, so I'm not gonna do that until I'm at a few thousand miles. And yeah, just playing it safe. No real big pulls except for when doing logs for Tyler, but aside from that, just normal city driving. That's why I'm only at 300 now, not like 3,000, but baby steps. We'll get there.
So my homework right now is to just get as much driving in as possible. And if you can't tell, the weather's not doing too great in Wisconsin right now, so I sort of have a deadline. So quick driving montage and then we'll hop back.
Driving montage, going passage of time in montage. Inside the car, outside the car, it looks like we're showing us driving montage. Let's hold on the front of the car to signify lots of miles as we upload and download and log 8-speed tuner files. There's the car's derriere. Oh look, some lens flare. Wait, it's cloudy again. That signifies spin. Sometimes it's dead. Driving montage, going passage of time in montage. That's too close, my face is itching. It looks like we're done with the driving montage.
Walk me through from your side of things how, like, the tuning process for my car.
Fortunately, you weren't the first or the beta tester for the BOSS500 kit. I have a few other guys that are tuned on the BOSS500 kit. So starting out there, because you come in a little bit later, you have all of the work that's already put into those cars, put into the file already. So from what you had was basically one of my development level files starting out, and then I tweak from there. And because I've done so many of them by now, the development file on its own is pretty good, and you could pretty much just load it and go. But I mean, most of the power comes from custom tuning. But on my end, I look at things like what parts you have on the vehicle, tuning specifically for that. I know we're still stock fuel system. Not everybody is still stock fuel system, so that has to be taken into account. Limit the amount of airflow that the engine can take because of the fuel system limitations. Basically, I just go through the file and set it up based on my experience, and then send it to you. And when you send me a log of a third gear pull and some regular driving, I can look at fuel trims, look at timing, look at knock retard, look at all that stuff, and then make adjustments accordingly.
Tell me what are our plans from here forward with my car, as far as what's the future hold for my car from your end?
So what I would like to see is probably a high pressure fuel pump upgrade. So a piston of some kind, and Mark 7R injectors, which gives you a nice, it's about 25 to 30% bump in fuel injection just on the injectors if you have the high pressure fuel pump to supply it. So right now you're running 22.5 PSI and 3.5 degrees of timing at 3,100 RPM. So that's pretty much right where your power it kicks in at the lowest point, and then peak boost is almost 26 psi by 3300, and then all the way up top is 23.5 to 24 psi with 9.5 degrees of timing at 6700 rpm, and that's in the last log that you sent me. So right now we're only running it at about 65% wastegate duty cycle to achieve those boost pressures. So there is a lot of headroom, but there isn't headroom in the fueling. So once you upgrade the injectors and the high pressure fuel pump, we'll be able to push that closer to 28 to 30 psi on pump gas. Anything beyond that, even though it is a big turbo, the gains start to get negligible once you go above about 30 to 32 psi.
So currently, how much power would you estimate my car has to the wheels?
Oh, that's a dangerous question. So right now, at 6,700 RPM, it's running about 348 grams per second. So if you just do the basic calculation for grams per second to horsepower, is you add about 20%. So 348, add 20%. We're gonna be over 400 crank for sure, but how close to 420, 440, which is pretty much the fueling limit. Like, no one really runs any more than 440 horsepower on the stock high pressure fuel pump and injectors. I would say probably around 420 to 440 is where you're at. 420.69, you know.
Right now I'm at about 1,600 miles on the car, and 1,500 miles is sort of a unanimously agreed upon break-in level where once you hit that, you can beat on the engine a little more, take it for longer drives. So that really opens up the possibilities of what I can do to the car now. And thanks to the valuable insight from Tyler, I know I need new injectors, I need a high-pressure fuel pump piston upgrade, and sort of related but unrelated, I need to replace my in-tank low-pressure fuel pump because mine sat for a long time. It went bad, so replacing that. But I'm going to do all those upgrades. I'm going to continue to add mileage to the car, and then we can really push the car to its full potential and max out this turbo setup and cook with some hot sauce. But before we go, I got one last question for Tyler. If somebody wants to have their car tuned by you, how do they get a hold of you?
So Facebook, Instagram, Ward Performance Tuning. Those are the best ways to get a hold of me through my business pages.
All right, I think that'll do it for this episode. I know what I need now, and I have the best tuner possible for the platform that I know of. So that means in the next episode, I'm putting this car on the dyno and getting horsepower numbers. So you can stop asking. See you next time. Probably shouldn't have parked up right next to an airport. Up to this point in the series, you guys have seen me. Are you as tired? And I have the best. Luckily, I learned of a great drive as much as possible.